From the colorful platformers of the PlayStation 1 era to the cinematic blockbusters of today, PlayStation exclusives have come a long way. In this retrospective, we're just going to explore how Sony transformed its first-party lineup into a defining force in gaming. When you think of PlayStation, what comes to mind? Is it a wild Bandicoot spinning through crates? A ghost of Sparta bathed in blood and vengeance? Or maybe the emotional weight of a father calling out to his son, "Boy." From humble beginnings to industry dominance, the story of PlayStation exclusives is a journey of reinvention. It's a tale of risk, creativity, and identity, one that helped Sony carve its legacy into gaming history. Now, Sony's entrance into the gaming world with the PlayStation in 1994 was unexpected, but it was revolutionary. At a time when Sega and Nintendo ruled the console landscape, Sony's sleek gray box came packed with ambition and a mission to bring gaming to a more mature, multimedia-driven audience. But Sony didn't have a Mario, or it didn't even have a Sonic. Instead, it leaned on partnerships, most notably with third-party developers like Naughty Dog, Insomniac Games, and Polyphony Digital. These studios would then go on to become pillars of the PlayStation brand, delivering hits like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, and Gran Turismo. These weren't just fun games. They were Sony's way of saying, we're here to stay. Now, during this era, I would say the key traits of the era were platformers dominating, strong third-party support, and then they started to slowly form their long-term brand identity, which would then go on to evolve into the cinematic games that we see today. Now, with the PlayStation 2, Sony doubled down, not just on hardware, but also on its vision. The PS2 wasn't just the best-selling console of all time, it was a cultural movement. What had changed? PlayStation exclusives began to mature. And like I was saying, we started to get more of those story-driven games, as well as the platformers infusing the cinematics of the story-driven games as well. We got games like Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, and Sly Cooper. Mascot platformers, yes, but infused with narrative and depth and refined gameplay. More importantly, Sony began fostering experimental projects. Quiet masterpieces that pushed storytelling to artistic new heights. And then came God of War, a brutal, mythological hack and slash that introduced us to Kratos, a character who would go on to define the PlayStation legacy. The PS2 era showed us that PlayStation exclusives weren't just games, they were statements. Now, if the PS2 era was bold, the PlayStation 3 era was more cinematic, I would say. This is when Sony exclusives stopped mimicking Hollywood and they started rivaling it. Although the launch was rocky, and again, it's personally not my favorite console from the lineup, as you guys have seen, I've noted on the channel before, PlayStation 2 is my favorite console of all time, and then I would put the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and then PlayStation 1, and I would put the PlayStation 3 right at the very end, but we will go on to discuss its strengths and weaknesses. So, like I was saying, the PlayStation 3 was expensive, and it was very complex to develop for, and initially it lagged behind the Xbox 360, but Sony's secret weapon became the storytelling, which they eventually leaned into going into PlayStation 4. But before I get ahead of myself, in PlayStation 3, we got Uncharted Drake's Fortune, and later Uncharted 2, games that blended blockbuster action with charismatic performances and sharp writing. Heavy Rain also explored the interactive drama. Infamous offered morality-based gameplay, and then there was The Last of Us, Naughty Dog's magnum opus, and arguably the moment when PlayStation truly matured and truly found their voice with regards to the storytelling gameplay. Again, these weren't just great games, they were emotional experiences, narratives that took center stage, motion capture, voice acting, and environmental storytelling that became the new normal for PlayStation. This is where the PlayStation exclusives began defining the console war. Now, by the time the PlayStation 4 launched, Sony had learned all of its lessons and it had perfected its methods. It delivered a powerful, affordable console and doubled down on what gamers loved most: the story-rich single-player exclusives. God of War 2018 reimagined Kratos not as a rage-filled Spartan, but as a grieving father. Horizon Zero Dawn gave us a futuristic world ruled by robotic beasts. Bloodborne delivered gothic horror in pure From Software fashion. Marvel Spider-Man proved that superhero games could be emotional, thrilling, and tightly crafted. And then towards the end of the generation, we also had Uncharted 4, and then The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, which again, Ghost of Tsushima is one of the last major PS4 exclusives, and it was a love letter to samurai cinema, blending beautiful visuals with fluid combat and poignant themes of honor. Sony's exclusives weren't just system sellers, they were the reason to own a PlayStation, and they still are the main reason to own a PlayStation. Now, so far with the PS5, I would say Sony has done well, but also stumbled a little bit because they've done well to build on their winning formula. But again, it's now become more about refinement and evolution. So again, from the dazzling visuals of Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, to the roguelike intensity of Returnal and the expansive storytelling of Spider-Man 2, as well as the great game that we got, which was God of War Ragnarok. I feel like PS5 exclusives are pushing technical boundaries while staying true to the emotional storytelling of PlayStation. And then we also got Astro's Playroom, which in this case, I'm calling it Astro's Playroom, Astro's Bot, which was the follow-up from Astro's Playroom. And again, this was more of the love letter to gaming. And this, I would say, is ushering in PlayStation's new mascot. Again, even though it's short, it's just a celebration of PlayStation's legacy, packed with charm, nostalgia, and clever design. And again, some fans are beginning to worry that Sony is stepping away from what made their exclusive special, but others see this as a growth and a way to bring these beloved stories to more people. The future, is it still cinematic? Is it still ambitious? But maybe now more global, more inclusive, and more adaptable, I would say. So again, so far this generation, we can't really put a pin on it because we are still in the PlayStation 5 generation, but I would say, again, it's more of those themes of it being more refined rather than them working on a new formula, which we may see going into the PlayStation 6 generation. But I digress. So what would we say defines a PlayStation exclusive? Is it the production value? The sweeping orchestral scores? The environment? The rich storytelling? Or is it something deeper? A commitment to treating games as more than distractions, as art forms capable of moving, inspiring, and challenging us. From Crash Bandicoot to Spider-Man 2, PlayStation exclusives have grown alongside the industry, reflecting changes in technology, audience, and ambition. But at their core, they've always chased one thing, and I would say that one thing is emotion. Sony's best exclusives aren't just played, they're felt deep down in your soul. imagine having to put down your own brother.
Oh my god.
Oh. Died last time. Come on, let's go. Woo. Let's go. It's those father-son moments again. Oh, but now Freya's here as well.
That if you just build great games, everything would turn around.
And then the great games point is the one that I wanted to argue against heavily, because what is the point of your console if it's not for games? Like, what is the point of having a console if you're just gonna do Game Pass and cloud gaming? Like